Joining us for more on his legacy, we're now joined by Steve Paikin in Toronto. He is the host of the Paikin podcast, and he's also a good friend of Ken Dryden. So nice to see you this morning, and I know it is very difficult for you because you were both close friends.
Marianne, it's a very sad day. I woke up this morning, looked at my iPhone, and saw the email from the family pointing out that Ken had died. And while I was shocked, I wasn't, because Ken and I stayed in touch a lot, mostly by email. And the last couple of emails I'd sent to him were not replied to. And I found that very curious because he always replied quite quickly. So I had a hunch something was up.
And what are you thinking of this morning as you reflect on your friendship and the memories you have together?
You know, the funny thing is I'm actually not thinking about the 6 Stanley Cups and all the trophies. And I'm thinking about how extraordinary it was that for whatever reason, he decided that he liked the program on TVO that I used to host, The Agenda. He'd been a guest on it many times. Every time he came out with a book, we had him on, and we talked about hockey, and we talked about headshots in hockey, which was the passion of his life. But we spent precious little time actually talking about his career. We would talk about a lot of different things, and I was just reviewing. I kept all of the emails he sent me over the years, and he would send me long, detailed, quite glorious emails offering constructive criticism on the job I was doing and making ideas, putting forward ideas for shows that he thought we ought to do. And I'm trying to think now, June 26th or 27th, we did one of those show ideas, and that was the last time he was on. And it was a brilliant, iconoclastic Ken Dryden type of show. And I'm so glad we had a chance to do it because it was the last time I spoke to him.
What was the show about?
He said to me, he emailed me one day and he said, I got an idea for a show. Can I talk? So I called him up and he said, remember 50 years ago when people would smoke in elevators or in movie theaters or on airplanes and there would be a smoking and a non-smoking? Yeah, of course I remember, Ken. Why? He said, because we look back 50 years later and we think, how stupid was that? What are we going to look back at 50 years from now and think, my goodness, how stupid were we? How could we have done that? And I said, that's kind of a neat, quirky idea for a show. Let me pitch that and see how we do. Well, the brass liked it. We did it. We had Ken on with a bunch of other people. And, it was one of those really thoughtful, intelligent, interesting, quirky Ken Dryden type shows. And of course, the thing I also remember about that show was he said he was suffering from terrible back pain and therefore could not come into the studio. So we had him on from his home via Zoom. And I don't know, Marianne, maybe that was the first indication that he was fighting something more than a bad back. I'm thinking that might have been an indication that he was starting to deal with something way worse, like the cancer that eventually took him.
Mm-hmm. And, it is nice that you have that copy of all of those emails that you can look back on like a book, reading back on your conversations and your memories. And speaking of memories, I do want to ask you about your memories because you grew up watching him. I know you said you didn't talk much about hockey together, but what stood out to you when it comes to him and how great he was as a player?
It's not so much that he was great as a player, and I often joked with him, he's born in Hamilton, so am I. He loved hockey, so did I. We both sat in the stands for Game 2 at Maple Leaf Gardens of the Team Canada-Soviet Union Summit Series, because Tony Esposito started that night. We both loved politics and were very deeply involved, and I used to joke with him all the time, Ken, between the two of us, we won 6 Stanley Cups, so, we're bonded for life. I think what made him so extraordinary was just this completely varied and broad career that he had. I mean, think about it. There have been thousands of players, tens of thousands, who played the National Hockey League. Nobody else like him. Nobody else left hockey at 30 to go get a law degree. Nobody else sat in classrooms for a year so that he could do a study on education policy for former Premier Bill Davis. Montreal Canadiens as a player, Toronto Maple Leafs as president. I mean, that's different, okay? All of the game, maybe the best sports book ever written. In fact, I wrote a book about hockey about 15 years ago, and I called it The New Game as a tribute to him. Parliament, cabinet, the fact that we got our first ever national child care policy because he was the social development minister that got it through. I mean, look at all the different ways in which this guy contributed to our world, and it's a so much better world than it might otherwise have been because of him.
Looking at how Prime Minister Mark Carney described him, he said that Ken was quote, big Canada, and he was best Canada. What do you think of that comment, and how do you think he'll be remembered?
Oh, it's so true. It's a great comment, and it's absolutely true. And I think, obviously, different people will remember him for different reasons. There are the hockey fans today who are just simply going to remember all of the glory that he brought to Les Glorieux on the ice. And, of course, he deserves to be remembered for that. But then remember the whole picture. Remember that he was so much more than just what he did on the ice. It's what he did off the ice and what he did to try to clean up hockey. I mean, he wrote an extraordinary book about a hockey player who died prematurely because of head injuries, and he so desperately wanted to make the NHL wake up, which is one of the things, apropos of the show we ended up doing on the agenda, that's one of the things that he insisted. We're going to look back 50 years from now and say, how did we ever allow so many dangerous headshots in hockey without declaring it an emergency and getting rid of it altogether? To his last breath, that was an issue that just absolutely animated his life. And when that day comes, when they really will eliminate headshots, Ken Dryden should take a victory lap on that one, because he will have done more than anybody to make it happen.
Steve Paikin, thank you so much for your time and for sharing some of your memories with us this morning, your friendship, and of course, how your friendship blossomed professionally into personally. Thank you so much again.
I appreciate the chance. Thank you, Marianne.